Tuesday morning, May 28th. My article today, this is Yaro Kubrin, High at 9 News. My article today is from Kyle Yeager at Marijuana Moment. Biden Drug Czar says marijuana rescheduling will have historic impact, but overstates effects of racial disparity in criminalization. The White House Drug Czar says the Biden administration's move to reschedule marijuana will have historic and long-lasting impact that could also make banks more willing to work with state-licensed cannabis businesses via legitimate interstate commerce. But for the second time in this past week, he seemed to overstate what the reform would accomplish, this time by suggesting it would address the racial disparity in cannabis enforcement. Rahul Gupta, director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy, weighed in on the proposal to move marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 under the Controlled Substance Act in an interview with the Star Tribune that was published on Friday. We had a policy for over a half a century where so many lives have been upended because of our failed approach to marijuana. We've had so many people arrested, prosecuted, and incarcerated. We know white, black, and brown people use marijuana at similar rates, but black and brown incarceration rates are higher. Gupta said rescheduling is going to be really important to remove barriers to critical research and perhaps drug development. It could also lead to more research into the benefits of medical marijuana. However, he said that this decision is going to have historic and long-lasting impacts. He also made several additional comments about the move that appeared to inflate the effects of the reform. It happens that with Schedule 3 drugs are much, much lower priority than that, say the way of like Tylenol with codeine or testosterone or Schedule 3, the official said, but it will have an impact on racial disparity, incarceration, and prosecutions, and whether in Massachusetts or West Virginia or Texas, Americans should be able to get treatment for their condition. A Schedule 3 reclassification would not federally legalize marijuana, and since the Food and Drug Administration has not approved the plant as a medicine that could be prescribed, the threat of criminal prosecution would remain in force for any cannabis-related activity. Gupta similarly oversimplified the idea of marijuana's potential availability as a prescription drug in another recent interview. There's nothing about the potential rescheduling action that would specifically address racial disparities in criminal enforcement. Penalties for certain marijuana-related activities would be reduced, and the policy change could theoretically signal to prosecutors that cannabis offenses are an even lower priority, but it would not change the law in a way that would inherently affect the rate of prosecution overall. Asked about how a transition to Schedule 3 could impact the willingness of banks to work with state-licensed marijuana businesses, Gupta said that we do know that the drugs that are Schedule 3 are in legitimate interstate commerce with the federal system. Again, however, he's referring to the FDA-approved drugs that could be prescribed as a health professional. By a health professional. FDA typically does not approve botanical substances as prescription drugs. Instead, it has so far only approved synthetic THC and CBD-based medications for the treatment of certain conditions. A report published by the Congressional Research Service earlier this month also clarified that further action by the FDA would be needed before marijuana products become available by prescription. I'll leave it to others to talk about the commercial process, the Drug Czar said. The focus for the president has been making sure Americans are able to get the help they need no matter where they live, and on the other side, making sure we're not harming people. Gupta was also asked about the possibility of a future administration reversing the rescheduling decision, like Thailand. He started by saying that Biden has given the opportunity to Congress to take action and did so because he could wait no longer. The independent reviews of these agencies followed established process and procedures in getting to this result. That process is driven through science, he said. I can't provide any hypothetical answers to what may happen. This is a change that is driven by policy, by science, by data, regardless of the political process. Rescheduling is a process that will continue to go on for the remainder of the year, he said. The historic nature of the actions that we're taking cannot be minimized. Not by you, Mr. Hype Man. The country's drug policy overall has caused too many lives to be lost and others to be impacted negatively. The president has been very consistent. No one should be in jail for using or possessing marijuana. These steps to move marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 is a policy that is consistent with the science in the 21st century. A former drug czar who served under President Barack Obama recently took a sharply different position, which I covered here on High at 9 News, on marijuana rescheduling than Gupta. Former director Gil Karolwalski recently said that cannabis is not medicine and that rescheduling was all big cannabis. This isn't people my age that are just old hippies that want to open up a pot shop somewhere, he had said in a podcast with former Representative Mary Bono. This is a huge business like big tobacco. Absolutely. Meanwhile, the proposed rule to federally reschedule marijuana was officially posted last week, kicking off a public comment period that's expected to elicit a major response from supporters and opponents of cannabis reform. Marijuana reform advocates and stakeholders have made clear that they intend to leverage the opportunity, with some planning to call planning to support the reclassification, while others intending to call for descheduling cannabis altogether. Prohibitionists are expected to oppose the incremental policy change and seek to keep marijuana in Schedule 1, and there's also a looming threat of litigation. What a surprise! While DOJ will take all public comments submitted by July 22nd into consideration as it weighs the reform, it is said in the notice that one of the topics it's especially interested in hearing about is the unique economic impacts of the rescheduling proposal, given that state-level legalization has created a multi-billion-dollar industry that stands to benefit from possible federal tax relief under the reform. On Capitol Hill, Chuck Schumer and colleagues have introduced legislation to federally legalize cannabis and impose certain regulations. The bill's prospects are dubious in the current divided Congress. Meanwhile, top Democrats in the House said that the Biden administration's move to reschedule marijuana is a step in the right direction, but should be followed with congressional action, such as passing the legalization bill Schumer filed. In a recent interview with Fox News, former DEA Administrator Asa Hutchinson said absolutely looks like the agency will follow through with moving marijuana from Schedule 1 to 3 under the CSA. Biden has separately issued 2 rounds of mass pardons for people who've committed federal marijuana possession offenses. Again, a Schedule 3 reclassification would not legalize cannabis or free people still incarcerated over cannabis. During his run for presidency, Biden pledged to move cannabis to Schedule 2, a stricter category compared with what's been proposed by his administration. This is Yarrow Kubrin, High at 9 News. I'd like to hear what my other guests and panelists have to say and what they think about this today.
Man, I find it super interesting that they acknowledge the fact that there'll be a major disproportionary thing with racial equality if this goes to Schedule 3.
This is such bullshit. And it's the reason why people who didn't really have a position on Biden one way or the other, when they see this hype parade that he and his vice president and now this guy are doing, it's such bullshit. And this guy said something that's actually different. He got his talking points a little conflated, because what the vice president has been saying is that no one should be in jail for smoking cannabis. And then this guy said no one should be in jail for smoking or possessing cannabis. And the way in which they continue to bang the drum and misrepresent the impact of the incremental changes that they're effectuating is intellectually dishonest. It's disingenuous. And so if you don't have an opinion on somebody and then you see them lying or hyping things to the degree that it's stretching credibility and truth, it's a great reason to no longer like them. I mean, people who might have otherwise been neutral on this administration are certainly, and who have half a brain, are going to see that this massive parade of look what we've done, look what we've done, look what we've done. It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. And then the way this guy, who is in charge of, his position requires some scientific capacity, is talking about how this is a combination of policy and politics and science. The science for this has been in for so long that that's also a disingenuous explanation for why we are where we're at right now. And so I want to like these folks. I really do. And every time they open their mouth, they just continue to lie. It's an absolute lie. What they are saying is an absolute lie. They've made these teeny little changes. It's like when my kids are going to do the dishes and I ask them to do the dishes and they wash 3 forks and there's a bunch of plates and bowls left. And then they come in the living room and they say, Dad, I did the dishes. Yep. No, you didn't. You washed 3 forks.
Exactly.
Kids do that too. You literally just walk into the kitchen and go, what about that? And what about that? And what about that? And what about that?
Yep, exactly. What about this and what about that?
What do you think, Saman?
I don't know if Saman can talk. Saman, are you there? Saman, are you with us?
He cleaned his office too well. He cleaned his audio away.
Yeah, he did something. Saman, what do you think about this, Saman? I guess Saman doesn't think about this at all much or whatnot.
We can't hear you, brother.
Yeah, we can't. You're not saying anything, Saman. Are you on mute?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah. There you go. Yes, there you go.
I want to know what you think about this.
So, I mean, what I was trying to say was that I'm conflicted about the Schedule 3 hoopla. Obviously, I think that it's been a carrot for both administrations, you know, and this is a long time coming, but like no one's done anything. They're just gonna try to ride the wave that they didn't create, that they've been stifling. So that's point number one. Point number two is that this doesn't get us closer to like being healthier, because now the government's just gonna fuck the natural products, right? So it's like it's just more of the same. Now it's just like consciously, you know, products with cannabis in them, we're gonna see them just be adulterated more by like the preservatives and the stuff that's necessary to keep them on the shelves at a rate that's far greater than just the state to state businesses and commerce that's happening now. So me personally, from a product formulation perspective, I'm always gonna like err on the side of the natural product. You know, I'm really disappointed because some of the great products and some of the great things that have been developed in the last, you know, 10, 15 years, some of the stuff that I've developed too, potentially has the risk of just being less effective because of the fact that it's a natural product and it'll have to be made differently potentially in the future if the FDA holds some kind of standards to the production and to the ingredients that can be used. We don't know. Again, this is all speculative, but from what we see, we can draw some conclusions, and you know, will probably be accurate. So I'm just gonna leave it there. But I mean, look, I just think it's a weaselly thing to do for a politician to try to be a proponent of cannabis at this time if they've never really been a proponent. And we all know that Biden's full of hot air. His clemency policy is don't let people who are in there unjustly for cannabis out. So, you know, fuck the government. That's all I got to say.